Hello everyone, and welcome to the channel. We all know the story, an apple, a serpent, and a one-way ticket out of paradise. Adam and Eve cast out of the Garden of Eden. For most of us, that's where the camera cuts. We imagine them wandering off into the sunset, destined to a hard but simple life of farming and raising a family, the end of Act 1. But what if I told you that wasn't the end of the story? What if it wasn't? The serpent wasn't finished with them, not by a long shot. The story of what happened after they left Eden is a lost epic, a harrowing tale of survival not just against the elements, but against a cunning cosmic enemy bent on finishing the job he started at the Tree of Knowledge. This is the story of humanity's first days in a broken world, a world where the shadows had teeth and God's voice had grown silent. The first thing that the rustle of the leaves was a whisper from the Creator, the flow of the rivers, a song of life. Now, there was nothing. Just the grating sound of their own panicked breaths and the howl of a wind that felt alien and hostile. The gate to Eden, guarded by a cherubim with a sword of swirling fire, was a constant, searing reminder behind them. There was no going back. Before them lay a world. That thorns and thistles, once a mere concept, were now a painful reality, tearing at their exposed skin. In the garden, food was a thought away. Here, every berry was suspect, every root a potential poison. Animals which had once been their companions now regarded them with a predatory glint in their eyes. The lion, whose mane Adam had once playfully braided, now saw him as meat. Fear was anew. He saw her now as he saw himself, fragile, mortal and terrified. The blame was a physical weight between them. He had listened to her voice over God's. She had listened to the serpent's voice over his. Their shared guilt was a chasm, and in the terrifying silence of this new world, they felt utterly and completely alone. Days bled into a week of desperate survival. They were in Eden. They never knew thirst. Crystal clear rivers flowed everywhere. Now they scrabbled for muddy water in shallow pools, their throats raw and burning. They were driven by a grief that was more than just loss of a home. It was the loss of innocence, the loss of God's immediate presence. They were like children abandoned in a dark forest, and the memory of their father's home was a constant agonizing. Collapsing to the ground, her body racked with sobs, she cried out, "My Lord Adam, this suffering is because of me. Take my life. Let me be the one to die, and perhaps God will forgive you and allow you back into the garden." Her words were a torrent of self-hatred. She saw herself as the source of all this misery, the cracked vessel that had spilled paradise onto the barren ground. Adam looked at the blame he felt. The quiet resentment was washed away by a wave of pity and a resurgence of the love that had been born in the heart of paradise. "Eve," he said, his voice raspy, "do not say such things. We are one. Your pain is my pain. God's judgment is on us both. What can we do? How can we repent? Is there any act, any penance that might soften his heart towards us?" So they devised a plan, a desperate act of atonement. Adam told Eve, "I will spend 40 days standing up to my neck in the waters of the river Jordan, and you will go to the river Tigris and do the same for 37 days. We will not eat. We will not speak. We will let the cold water cleanse the sin from our bodies. Perhaps God will see our suffering and have mercy." There was a logic to it. The logic of more. They had been cast out into a world of pain, so they would embrace that pain as their penance. They separated, each walking towards their chosen river, the silence between them now filled with a sliver of desperate hope. Adam waded into the Jordan, the icy current, a shock against his warm skin. The creatures of the river, the fish and the reptiles, swam away from him at first. But then, as he stood motionless, every day the sun beat down on his head, and every night the cold seeped into his bones. His body grew weak, but his will was iron. He prayed not with words, but with his entire being, a silent scream for forgiveness sent up to a silent heaven. Eve found her way to the Tigris, its powerful currents a terrifying force. As she stood in the water, the pain was immense. Her mind replayed the scene at the tree. Oh, she wept until she had no more tears, her sorrow mingling with the flowing water. But they were not alone in their suffering. Someone was watching, someone who had been watching them since the beginning. On the 18th day of Adam's penance, a new light appeared. not the harsh light of the sun, but a soft, glorious radiance that seemed to push back the shadows. Eve, shivering in the Tigris, saw it first. Out of the light stepped a figure, beautiful beyond description. "The Lord God has heard your prayers and your lamentations. He has heard Adam's cries. He has forgiven you. He has sent me to bring you out of this hardship and restore to you the sustenance you had in the garden." Hope, pure and overwhelming, flooded Eve's soul. It was the answer to her prayers. God had sent an angel. All the pain, all the grief, it was over. She didn't hesitate. She scrambled out of the water, her limbs weak, and the being helped her up, its touch warm and reassuring. It led her towards the Jordan, where Adam was still standing, his body gaunt, his eyes fixed on the heavens. But as they approached, Adam saw them. He saw the radiant being, and he saw Eve, her face alight with joy, and a cold dread, colder than the river water, gripped his heart. He knew the faces of God's angels. He had walked with them in Eden. This was not one of them. She turned, her smile faltering at the sight of his panicked face. "Adam, my lord, God has sent him. We are forgiven." Adam's eyes locked onto the angel, the beautiful face, the radiant light. It was a mask, and behind the mask he sensed a familiar, ancient evil, an evil he had met once before, in the form of a serpent. "Who are you?" Adam demanded, his voice gaining strength. The being's smile tightened. The beautiful mask flickered. For a split second, Adam saw the coiled rage behind the eyes. "Oh, Adam," the angel hissed, its voice losing its musical quality, becoming sharp and sibilant. "All my glory, all my power, I have been deprived of it because of you, because God created you in his image. I was cast down, and now you stand here, weak and naked." The beautiful features twisted into a mask of pure hatred. It was Satan, the adversary. He had come back to finish what he started. Eve screamed, stumbling backward, the horrible truth crashing down on her. She had been deceived again by the same enemy. The same voice that had whispered to her in the garden had now come disguised as an angel of light, preying on her deepest desires for forgiveness and restoration. She wants to believe the lie, and you think this suffering will earn you God's favor. He has forgotten you. You are dust, and I will hound you and your children until the last of you returns to that dust. This world is mine now, not his, and you are my subjects." With that, he vanished, leaving behind only the smell of sulfur and the crushing weight of their renewed despair. Adam pulled himself from the river. They had not only failed to earn God's forgiveness, they had proven that they were still vulnerable, still foolish, still susceptible to the serpent's lies. The first great test outside of Eden was over, and they had failed miserably. The war was real, and they were losing. Life became a grueling routine. The encounter with Satan had taught them a harsh lesson. This new world was a battlefield. They learned to work the cursed ground, their hands bleeding as they coaxed a meager existence from the soil. Adam taught himself to hunt, a grim task that filled him with a deep sadness. In Eden, he had named the animals. Now, he killed them to survive. The intimacy of creation had been replaced by the brutality of the food chain, but the deepest change was the birth of their children. This was God's command to be fruitful and multiply. But what kind of world were they bringing a child into? A world of thorns, predators, and a lurking devil. When Cain was born, Eve held him close and whispered, "I have gotten a man from the Lord." There was hope in her voice. Perhaps this new life was a sign of God's continued blessing. A new beginning. Cain was a child of the earth. He grew up he became a tiller of the ground, wresting a harvest from the stubborn land. He was a product of the post-Eden world, hard and unyielding like the ground he worked. Then came Abel. He was different. Where Cain was intense, Abel was gentle. He was drawn not to the soil, but to the living creatures. He became a shepherd, tending his flock with a quiet patience that seemed like a relic from another world. He would talk to his... Adam and Eve loved both their sons, but they saw the rift growing between them. It was a subtle thing, a difference in spirit that was as vast as the one between a farmer and a shepherd. Cain saw Abel's work as easy, trivial. Tending sheep was nothing compared to the breaking labor of plowing and harvesting. He saw his brother's quiet contentment, and it bred a slow, burning resentment in his heart. He tried to share the joy of a newborn lamb, but Cain would just scowl and turn back to his fields. The whispers of the serpent had not ended at the river Tigris. They had found a new target. Satan saw in Cain a fertile ground for his poison. He saw the pride, the jealousy, the feeling of being overlooked. He began to whisper to Cain in the quiet moments, in the heat of the midday sun, in the dark of the night. They look at you and they see the curse. Asterisk, the lies took root. Cain's resentment grew into a bitter envy. He began to see his parents' love for Abel not as love, but as preference. He saw God's blessing on Abel's flocks as a judgment against his own hard labor. The world in Cain's eyes was profoundly unfair. The time came for them to make an offering to God. It was a practice Adam had taught them. Cain brought an offering from his harvest, some fruits, some vegetables, an afterthought. The leftovers Abel, with a heart full of reverence, selected the very best of his flock. The firstborn, the fattest and most perfect lamb. He prepared it with care, a genuine sacrifice of the best he had. They built their altars, and then they waited. A fire descended from heaven, but it did not touch Cain's altar. It was a clear and undeniable sign. God had accepted Abel's offering and rejected Cain's. The silence at Cain's altar was deafening. The smoke from Abel's drifted towards him, a sweet-smelling mockery of his failure. All the resentment, all the jealousy, all the whispered lies of the serpent coalesced into a single blinding point of rage. His face fell. The darkness that had been brewing in his heart, not in a pillar of fire, not in a whirlwind, but in a voice that was both intimate and terrifyingly vast. A voice that spoke directly to Cain's soul. Why are you angry? Why has your face fallen? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. It was a warning, and it was a predator, a crouching beast, waiting for the moment of weakness to pounce and devour him. God was giving him a way out. The choice was his: rule over the beast or be consumed by it. But Cain couldn't hear the offer of grace. He only heard the confirmation of his rejection. God himself had chosen Abel over him. The serpent's whispers now became a roar in his mind. Asterisk, he is right. You will always be the failure. Asterisk. Cain turned away from God's voice. He looked at his brother, who was watching him with concern and pity, and in Abel's gentle eyes, Cain saw only the reflection of his own inadequacy. Let's go out to the field, Cain said to his brother, his voice deceptively calm. Abel, suspecting nothing, agreed. He loved his brother, despite the distance between them. Perhaps Cain wanted. They walked in silence for a time, the tension thick in the air. Then they stopped. Why? Cain's voice was a low growl. Why does God favor you? Why is everything you do blessed while I break my back on this cursed ground for nothing? Abel was taken aback. Brother, I don't know. I only gave what was in my heart. God sees the heart. The heart. The Cain spat the word. So my heart is worth. The lies of the serpent had done their work, twisting love into hate, brotherhood into murderous jealousy. Abel reached out a hand. Cain, no, that's not what I mean. But it was too late. The beast had been unleashed. Cain lunged at his brother. Gentle Abel was no match for the farmer's strength, a strength forged by years of wrestling with the earth. The first blow was struck, and then another. The first murder. Cain stood over Abel's body, his hands covered in his brother's blood. He looked down at the still form, the life gone from the eyes that had only ever shown him kindness. For a moment, the rage subsided, replaced by a cold, horrifying shock. What had he done? The ground beneath his feet seemed to groan. The blood, his brother's blood, was soaking into the very earth he had worked his whole life, and the question echoed in the unnatural silence. Cain, in his panic and his pride, lied the first lie to God since the garden. I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper? The insolence, the defiance. It was the serpent's voice speaking through his mouth. But you cannot hide from God. The divine voice thundered back, filled with a sorrow that was more terrible than any anger. What have you done? Listen, now you are under a curse and driven from the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you. You will be a restless wanderer on the earth. The curse was absolute. The very earth he loved had now turned against him. He was to be an exile, a fugitive forever cut off from his family, his home, and his identity. The full weight of his sin. Today you are driving me from the land, and I will be hidden from your presence. I will be a restless wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me. God, in a final mysterious act of mercy, placed a mark on Cain, a mark of protection, a sign that vengeance belonged to God alone. And then Cain turned his back on the body of his brother, on the land of his birth, and on the presence of God, and they had seen the smoke from Abel's altar and knew he had been accepted. They had seen Cain's altar untouched. They waited for their sons to return, a sense of foreboding settling upon them. It was Adam who found him. He saw the still form in the field, and he ran, his heart pounding with a terror he hadn't felt since he heard God walking in the garden after his sin. He knelt beside his son, he touched Abel. Eve heard the cry and came running. When she saw her son, her beautiful, gentle son, lying dead, a part of her died with him. This was it. This was the death the serpent had promised. You will surely die. They hadn't understood. They thought it meant their own death. They never imagined it would be this. Their sin had not just cost them paradise. It had reached out from the past through their own bodies and had poisoned their... The joy of creation had been replaced by the bitter reality of death. The world was not just a hard place to live. It was a place where love could be twisted into murder, where brother could kill brother. The serpent had won another devastating victory. The war was no longer just about them. It was being fought in the hearts of their children. If you find this story as gripping as I do, and you want to see more explorations of these hidden biblical epics, now let's get back to the story of Adam and Eve, because the darkest chapters were still to come. After a century of mourning, Eve bore another son. They named him Seth, which means appointed, for Eve said, God has appointed for me another child in place of Abel, since Cain killed him. Seth was different from his brothers. He was not hard like Cain, nor was he as gentle as Abel. He was the new hope, the beginning of a righteous line through which God's promise would be carried forward. The years began to stretch into centuries. Adam and Eve had many more sons and daughters. Humanity began to spread across the earth. But Adam never forgot. He lived to be 930 years old, and every one of those years was lived in the shadow of his one catastrophic mistake. He saw his children and his children's children build cities. The world was filling with people, but it was also filling with sin. As Adam grew ancient, his body frail and his eyes dim, he knew his time was coming to an end. The sentence of death pronounced so long ago in the garden was finally ready to be carried out. He felt a sickness take hold of him, a pain that was more than just physical. It was the pain of a world groaning under the weight of his transgression. He gathered all his children around him. My children, he said, his voice a dry whisper, like leaves skittering across the ground. I am old, and I am dying. I want you to know the truth of our fall, so that you may guard your own hearts. He told them about Eden. He spoke of its beauty, of walking with God in the cool of the day. He described a world without death, without pain, without fear. His children listened, their faces a mixture of the single act of disobedience that had unraveled creation. He didn't spare himself. He spoke of his own weakness, his failure to protect his wife and to obey his Creator. He recounted the horror of hearing God's footsteps in the garden, the shame of trying to hide from the one who sees all. Eve sat beside him, her own ancient face a mask of grief, nodding as he spoke. She remembered it all. Seth, his heir. Adam looked at his son, the hope of the future. Yes, my son, it is the beginning of the end. I sent your mother Eve and you, Seth, to the borders of the garden. I thought perhaps if you pleaded with God, he would send an angel with the oil from the tree of life, and I could be anointed and healed of this pain. Seth then spoke to the gathered family. I will tell you what happened. When my mother and I went to the gate of the garden, and I looked up and saw the cherubim, the guardian of the gate, his sword a terrifying river of fire. And beyond him, I saw the trees of the garden. I saw the tree of life, its branches reaching to the heavens. He paused, the memory vivid in his mind, and as we prayed, the archangel Michael appeared to us. His voice was not angry, but full of a great sadness. He said to me, Seth, man of God, his soul will depart from his body in 6 days. The family gasped. 6 days, but the angel gave us a promise, Seth continued, his voice rising with a strange power. He told me that this is not the end. He spoke of a time to come, 5,500 years from now. he said God's own Son, the great Christ, would come to the earth. He will be baptized in the Jordan, the very river our father stood in for his penance. And he will raise up the body of your father Adam, and with him the bodies of all the dead. He will wash away their sins. He will restore them to a paradise far greater than the one that was lost. Adam listened, and a faint smile touched his lips. He had been given this vision as well, a secret promise from God that his failure was not the final word. A second Adam would come, a perfect son who would succeed where he had failed. It was enough knowing this. Adam prepared to die. He spoke to Eve one last time. My wife, my other half, my life is ending when I am gone. Leave me be. God will not forget me. He will remember his creation. He will seek out his own vessel. Eve wept, her hand on his. My Lord, we were one in the garden, and we were one in transgression. Do not separate us in death. Let me be buried. He called all his children closer. Look at me, he rasped. I am dying, and because of me death has come to you all. And then he fell silent. As the sun began to set, the sky grew dark, not the darkness of night, but a strange, supernatural gloom. The sun, the moon, and the stars all seemed to lose their light for 7 days. Adam's children watched in terror, and as Adam took his final breath, a chariot. Seth saw it all. He saw the angels preparing Adam's body for burial, wrapping it in fine linen with fragrant oils. He saw the very hand of God stretched out from heaven, placing Adam in his tomb in the earth from which he was made, and he heard the voice of God echo across the darkened world, a voice of both sorrow and promise. Adam, Adam, you sought to be a god, and so you were given death. But I promise you, your enemy who led you astray will be cast into the darkness, but you and your righteous children will live in my kingdom forever. 6 days after Adam's death, Eve gathered her children. She told them of her own approaching end. She recounted her life, the joy of Eden, the terror of the fall, the pain of childbirth, the murder of her son. She urged them to remember God, to carve his laws on their hearts, and then she too laid the first man and the first woman, united in life, in sin, in death, and in the promise of resurrection. The first chapter of human history was over. But the story was far from finished. Adam and Eve were gone, but the world they had brought into being was now the stage for a much grander drama. A drama of floods and patriarchs, of prophets and kings, of empire, all of it a slow, painful, bloody march towards that promised day when the second Adam would arrive to face the serpent once and for all, and finally fulfill the promise whispered to a dying man and a grieving son at the gates of a long-lost paradise. Their story is our story. The war that began in their hearts is the war that rages in ours. The choice that was given to Cain is the choice that is. Adam and Eve's lost chapters are not just a forgotten myth. They are a chilling and powerful reminder of the stakes of that choice, and the incredible, unshakable hope that even in our darkest failures, redemption is always waiting. All right, that is all for today's video. I hope this journey into the lost story of Adam and Eve was as fascinating for you as it was for me. If you liked this video and want to support the channel,